Welcome, everybody. It's another hour of SSS APR fun, fun, fun. Wanted to start off by asking if are y'all hot enough? Right now it's 98 degrees. I think we got to 103. Anybody beat that one? Anyone more than 103 or 98 degrees right now? Great. Hey, Ryan, how are you? North Carolina checking in. Miss Fleming, what is the temperature there? I need you to give me a temperature check there. Ryan, 78 degrees in your office. Okay, you know what? That's a little too hot for me. It needs to be a nice 73 here. Okay, where would you go? If you could visit any country for free, where would you go? And we just picked some here, right? Because we had to, we gave you a choices. All expenses paid. Where would you go? I think I would go to Australia. Why? Because I'm a lazy tourist and I want to be able to somewhat understand everybody. So I'm thinking that might be the place where I might be able to understand folks the most. But also, it just looks so beautiful, right? Looks so awesome. And I think I don't know, Donna, I saw where you could fit like a bunch of state of Texas, like a bunch of them into Australia. So we think we're big, right? But then when you look at Australia, so I don't know, maybe I want to go to the other place that is, bigger than Texas, so to speak.
I would
But
go
I
to
don't know.
any of them. They all look interesting to me.
I think second choice with me would be Japan,
Hmm.
Italy, and Brazil. I think that's what I would hit. If I could, like I could go anywhere. I'm tied to the laptop, y'all. I feel like that lady in Misery, that movie, that not the lady, but remember the movie? Those of you that can go back in time, where she trapped that person writing stuck to his laptop, his
Yes.
type so that he would keep writing for her. So sometimes I feel that way, but anyway. But you know what? I am enjoying working on the APR because it's something that, believe it or not, but thank you for that poll. Sometimes it's nice to dream and be thinking about where you could go. But I think, Italy beat Australia. Okay. Sound like World Cup all over again, but here we go. All right, so thank you all for playing along with that. And then let's get into the nitty-gritty of today's session. Today's session, as always, um, uh, unstructured in the sense that no real agenda except to talk about the APR. I think when I left off last week, I can get us started on something structured, and then I can also get into, I know what's another poll, Donna, and everything we're doing is on the fly right now. But could you create a poll asking folks, or we probably have it before, can you recycle that one that asks for the people that are joining us right now, what database program they use? I think we've asked once before. Is it Bloomin', Lakai? Oh, and it is winter in Australia. Another reason why I was gravitating toward Australia. Thank you. Okay. So we're gonna see if not so much about your first APR, but that's fine. It's good to know. If y'all let us know if you've ever worked on an APR before. And I am wondering how many people here are using a particular type of database because I think we've reached the point where I can go ahead and talk about specifics in that database, but I also don't want to leave anybody out. If you don't use the particular database I'm going to talk about today, there's still connections because everything ties back to the APR ultimately, okay? They're all the same. So, we have some student access users, Lakai. Please forgive me. If one of y'all would like me to, or would like to at least, or have any questions when they're looking at their student access, we can do that, plan for that at another session. And that will help, and we can record that as well and share it with people who are using student access. I don't know if student access has a demo version, so that we won't see any, students' information. So anybody out there with Lakai or student access, if you could get hold of a demo version, I would love, love, love teach me, or I do work with folks through student access or Lakai. Um, I don't know how to drive the bus, so to speak, but if you're driving me around, I can pretty much figure it out because ultimately the questions that we have, no matter what database you utilize, is upon the student situation and how we would report on the APR, no matter what or what manner it's structured. Okay, so thank you for that. We have about to most people using on right now with us 25 out of the 36 who have answered. Bloomin'. We have some Lakai, some student access. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's a good news. And I will try to make sure I can stay as universal as possible in my responses. So Ms. Fleming, thank you for the question. I know documents are Oh, I know the documents are available on the Dropbox, on the drive. I thought it said something about the drive-through, and I was like, oh, I didn't thought about opening a drive-through on the drive, but are the recordings available? So the recordings are, you're driving, don't be driving, and unless you're listening, don't be driving and texting, but thank you. So all the recordings are available on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type in Nosotros Education Center, go to the playlist, and there is a listing there. Probably the easiest place to find everything. Donna, where else? I forgot. Where else can they get the recordings? Lost my mind.
Well, the recordings for these sessions are available on the blog or on the YouTube channel.
Okay, so those are the two places to go. And every day, within 24 hours, usually, if I can remember to post it, because Donna and Leah get everything done. It's me. If anything's late or missing, it's me. I forget to review it or to schedule it. But I try to remember within 24 hours. So by 2 o'clock tomorrow, we'll post on the blog the latest link to today's session. But then it reminds you, hey, here's a link to go back and get to the YouTube channel, probably is the easiest where you could scroll through. And we're trying to do a summary of each session so you can kind of read ahead of time to see if it's anything you want to cover so you don't get forced listening to the whole thing. Because sometimes you have a particular question that you want answered. So, we also have a Q&A spreadsheet for each one, along with the webinar summary. So you can either read and see if you're interested in viewing, or you could listen to the recording, or you could go through straight to the spreadsheet that has all the questions and answers. And most of the questions I'm answering live. So you'll see the question asked if you go into the Q&A. And then what happens is on the spreadsheet, you'll see a timestamp as to when I attempted to answer that, if it makes any sense. So that's why we want to keep, chat is chat, suggestions, recommendations, but questions, if you wouldn't mind, thank you, putting those in the Q&A so we can have a record of those. So then you have a variety of ways to find, to scroll through items. So pick your poison, so to speak. Okay. All right. So last week, I don't see any more questions that I haven't answered yet. I was getting close to wrapping this up on this spreadsheet or the spreadsheet document here with the forms. A little too close, Lisa. Okay. And I want to make sure I'm sharing the right. You can see the document, Donna, the SSS APR form. Am I sharing that? Let me make
Yes,
sure,
I can see
please.
it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm getting down here to I believe we got down to field of study. Now, field of study degree, sorry, I have to make sure I say the complete thing. Field of study degree certificate earned. I tell you what, if someone asks me, what is the number one issue or error message that most people get? And it's this darn field, and it's an easy fix. This field is only completed for your participants that have graduated. If they do not have a graduation date of graduation plugged in or above it where it says that they graduated in these fields, if it's still an 8, no date, then this has to be, a lot of people put, well, we put unknown. No, you can't have an unknown. Well, you just told me I'm not supposed to put in their major. I'm only supposed to put in their field of study for their degree. This is correct. And it's very limited. So do your best. There's no way that anyone can check if it's right or wrong. Just be consistent, do your best. But for the majority of your students, the majority on an annual basis, you're going to select field 16, which is has not earned a degree. In fact, I usually tell the folks that I work with when I do the database training, when you put in a new student, I would recommend when you get to field 33, you go ahead and plug in 16 and leave it alone for every year that you serve them until they finally graduate. And once you plug in a date in 32, the system will trigger, well, 33 can't be a 16 anymore. So you could do it that way. But a lot of folks go ahead and put in, and initially, it looks like you're asking for their field to study only, but it's field to study degree. It's on that second line and it says certificate earned. So just a little tip there that it can't be unknown. It's got to be a 16 or it's got to be a specific field to study degree certificate earned. Okay, either way. All right. 34 is now again, see, 33 is not so important. You can get that wrong all day long. No one's going to come after you. There's no way to really verify right or wrong. But 34 does count toward your first objective of persistence. So isn't it kind of crazy that one of the last, close to last fields on the APR is actually the answer to your first objective on persistence? Persistence status field 34 at the beginning of 2627. So now we need to answer for every student. And remember, I told you want to work on first your active served and reported students, the ones that you're funded to serve. Isolate them and work specifically on their APR. Ignore the prior year students. Ignore them for a minute and just focus on your active served and reported students. So on an individual basis, because they have individual situations, how many of those students that were served in 25, 26 have registered, or you look right now in DataTel or PeopleSoft or whatever you use, you can see that they're registered again or they're enrolled and it looks like they're coming back. I would go ahead now and base my answer right now. If I see that they've registered again, whatever you need to check, and if they're coming back in the fall, I would put a number one if they're enrolled again. I would put a number two for anybody who graduated this year from your college with an associate's degree or a certificate and also transferred. Okay. Even though they might be coming back, they told you, well, you know what? Well, they say they transfer, so they're not. So that would be a two. So most of your students are just coming back for another year. So that would be a one. Some of your students graduated this year with an associate's degree or a certificate and they're transferring. And you might feel like you already said this earlier, and you're right. In a previous field, you also indicated that they graduated, but here you tell that they graduated and possibly transferred. And so you're asked again because they want to know, well, what's going to happen for fall of 26, 27? Or the third option is they've transferred from the grantee institution. For example, they were at your college, which is 2 year, and they went to a 4 year without receiving an associate's degree or certificate. And that's sad that we don't get to count that 2 year colleges, right? Because a lot of times we help a lot of students do well and then they just transfer only. And right now we don't get any credit for that, except to let them know, you know what? No, she's not going to be here next year because she transferred only. Code 4 is for those students that graduated with an associate's degree or certificate, but they didn't transfer. So although that student has told you, or you already know, yeah, the student graduated this year, um, they're actually coming back next year. So why don't I put enrolled at the grantee institution? No, you don't want to do that because you can only pick one of these choices. And you need to make sure for the persistence objective for this year, for 25, 26, that you double down and get credit for not only the graduation, but for persistence too, one last time, double counting. And that's okay. So you would select the four, even though since they didn't transfer, they may be coming back. That's fine. In 26, 27, you can bring that student back if you choose to. You don't have to, but it's your policy. If the student still shows a need for your program and you document that they still need you, and sometimes lately you need them more than they need you, but as long as you can document there's a need, you can decide to bring them back in 26, 27 as a continuing student. But initially for this APR for 25, 26, I'm going to select a code 4. Okay. Code 5 is for those of you at 4 year institutions when they graduate with a bachelor's degree or equivalent. And then number 6 is for those prior year students that another year they're not coming back. 6 is also the answer for all your students who have graduated in a previous year and they ask, well, did they come back for another year? okay, the following year. And that's when for most of them, you'll have to put a six. And people get nervous about that. They say, well, I'm going to lose, but wait a minute, but I'm going to lose that they graduated, right? No, because you got credit for graduation earlier under field 31 and the date. That stays there. But this on persistence is specifically asking for a certain school year. So a new school year. So you only get to claim here for 34 that you graduated once. You don't get to rest on those laurels and stay graduated forever. You only get to do that one time, and then after that, you're considered a six not enrolled. Okay. And I know it gets confusing when students do come back, but initially on the APR that the year after they graduated, it'll almost force you the APR to put that they're not enrolled for yet, 27, 28, for example. Then for 35, they want to know the amount of financial aid received. This is supposed to be the amount of financial aid that the student received as determined by financial aid office. And what they don't want you to do is they don't want you to include grant aid. Grant aid is the grant that you gave them that came out of your budget. Not everybody gets grant aid, right? Because we don't have enough money to give it out to everybody. So that should, Field 36 should just be for a few students. But if you did give them grant aid and it tells you now, this is going to be different. I didn't know the amount. Maybe someone out there does know the amount. I'm pretty sure it changed, but for 24, 25, it had to be no less than $740 and no more than 7,395. So that range may have changed for this year. I don't know. If anyone knows what that is, let me know. I normally don't worry about it a lot because I don't work with a lot of the clients that I work with don't have grant aid, or it's a small amount, so I haven't memorized what the cap what the minimum is and what's the maximum is. But they do want it separate if you do give grant aid out from the amount that you get in 35, which is supposed to be the amount you receive, which I guess could be translated into amount awarded. They don't really go into too much detail except what they give you here. The instructions don't go into much detail. And then, if anybody out there, I've talked to some folks that are struggling to get information from financial aid for Field 35. For whatever, there is a valid reason. They were given a directive a couple of years ago, and they forgot to mention that TRIO is a sister program. So it's okay to share information with TRIO, but they were told by all means do not share information with anybody outside of the financial aid office, and that kind of shut some of us out. Anybody else kind of in that same position, or maybe not? Maybe I've just happened to talk to folks that are not able to get this information, or they have to fight for it. So it's not a critical piece of information. I've seen I've seen people that didn't know or thought it was completely optional and have turned in zeros and have never gotten flagged for it. I don't think it's built yet to trigger that. I know that if you put the wrong grant aid amount for the year, it will trigger a pop-up window saying, no, that's not right. That's too high, too low. But I've yet to see anybody get an error message for the financial aid, the lack of it, or the amounts that are put in there. But anyway, do your best to get it. Maybe you have no problem getting that information. It's time consuming though, because you have to get it for each individual student to plug into whatever database you're utilizing to develop the Excel file. And then finally, we get to Field 37, which is for participant name change. And I thought this was so that you could have someone's name changed from previous reporting periods. But I've yet to run into someone who told me, yeah, I did that. And the next year it worked and I could use the student's new name and the APR found them. What I hear is the opposite. Every year, they say, every year I change that student's name in 37 and I change it in my database. And every year I get an error message because the department wants their old name back. So I don't know. I don't know if it works. You let me know, since there's so many of us on here right now, if you've had an issue either way with it working or not working. Okay, so those are the fields for the APR. We started a couple of weeks ago, starting from the very beginning. But I also wanted to give folks a chance. This is your time. You can ask anonymously in the Q&A. We prefer for you to ask there. If anybody out there right now is having any issues with any of the questions in the fields, anyone, and you can always pop up and ask. I can also show you where I get this information here from the database we utilize, which should be something similar to Lakai and student access, how you're able to pull that information. I'm showing you something that you should have either printed out or on your computer screen as you work in whatever database program you're utilizing, whether it's Blumen, Lakai, Student Access. I tell you, that's the best way to do it, whether you've been doing it for a million years like me or you're a newbie to doing the APR. You want to have access to this form, either printed out or on your screen. The other thing you want to have is your instructions, okay? Which is right here. I promise you, like I've said before, 99% of your any answer to any APR can be found between these two documents. Now, granted, I've already highlighted mine to kind of, or, things to watch out and to be aware of, things like that. So I urge you, I know we hate to read sometimes, but, I urge you to read and find out where some of the key questions are. And again, I mean, the answers are to some of the key fields. And I do want to stress again that on a regular basis, let's say it's not APR season, like I call this APR season, these instructions, more so than the spreadsheet that we were just looking at a second ago, during the year, I go back here to answer or help people with particular questions that they have about scenarios, situations going on with students. How long do they keep records? What about just the other day? What about if someone has not been here for a minute and comes back? Do they come back as continuing or new? Do I have to start all over again? All those questions you really can't get answered directly in the regulations, but you can get them in black and white in the instructions as guidance. So the APR instructions are a real excellent training tool or reference guide to have that I refer to more often or on the equal level as when I have to refer to the SSS regulations. Good stuff in here. So don't just put it away after you worked on the APR. Have it handy. Almost every question I see asked on the listserv or on Facebook, I come back here and copy and paste. Copy and paste. Okay. And some questions are, well, what would you do policy wise? I always try to give people, here's the regulation, but then here's what I would do. Lisa's take, which by the way, we have 2 issues out. I hope to hopefully get another third issue out on our resources page where we pick somebody's question and, we don't give any names out or anything like that, but good questions that I know that other people have also have the same question. So I kind of expand upon it and say, look, this is what the regulation is, but this is also what you could do. And this is what I would do. You don't have to do what I would do, but I want to make sure you know where the regulations are and what your options are. And then you come up with your policy that you should have in writing as to, how you handle things. Okay. So anyway, back to the fields here. Any questions about any of the fields? I mean, I'm going to show you a different way to look at it. I'm sure someone's going to ask a question. Something, there was I'm putting you on the spot. I know either Donna or Leah. Um, Lourdes brought it up in our last session this morning where we're talking about with Upward Bound folks. We had a grant writing workshop this morning. Um, there was a recent change in OMB to the ethnicity. And I think someone put the link, but if one of y'all could put I answered that in the general trio, our group for trio. Is there any way you guys can copy and paste the link to that conversation or copy and paste the question and answer? If you can, not a big deal if you
Yeah, I
can't.
think so.
Okay. Now, the big deal, what happened was the Department of the OMB has reclassified these ethnicity breakdowns or race. They've reclassified these. Now, will it impact SSS? Maybe, but they got to give you some time, and that possibly could be something that you would have to reclassify everybody. It doesn't change eligibility, it's just the manner in which they want it reported. So that was something that may impact the APR, maybe. Okay. The other part of that question was dealing with McNair, how it impacts that. And I answered that as well. But we're just going to focus on the first part of the question because that may impact all the APRs. And whenever one thing, this changing gender to sex made everything delayed. So I imagine that the reclassification of the ethnicity and the race categories, that might be a delay. But that doesn't mean we can't get our stuff done and with everything else. And if we have to, pivot to classify and answer appropriately information, or maybe they'll say moving on forward just for the funded to serve and we won't have to go back. I don't know, but at least we'll have everything else done. Okay. And that's my goal in meeting with y'all. And when I met with, when the team met, I said, I just know that so many people think that they have to wait until the final APR instructions come out or the website opens, or that they have to sit on their database in 25, 26 until the APR is submitted. Then they can roll over to 26, 27. I'm like, no, you got to go on the first day of classes. And then a lot of folks still, may not be aware that the first day of your reporting date for the APR is on the first day of classes. Okay, not when your budget starts. And I keep seeing that every day on Facebook that people are thinking they have until August 31st. Now, unless school starts for the fall, and some people tell me, yeah, we actually start September 1st here at the campus fall classes. Okay. So this year it worked out that it matched your budget, exactly matched. But most of the time it doesn't. So again, those things I wanted to get out there as much as possible so that people didn't think that they had to wait until a particular time of year to do the APR because it's not hard, it's just time consuming. And now is the time to knock it out before you get busy again for the next semester. Okay, so I'm going to put it out there one more time for any questions. Oh, we do have some. Sorry, I missed that. My bad. Okay, question number one. What would be some good allowable resources to purchase with grant funds to provide extra support for TRIO participants with disabilities? Okay, well, I can prepare a listing for you. Um, I want to talk about the timing though. Unless you right now can get students to use these services, um, and document that they've used them, I would wait to get approval on the carryover and purchase them for use starting after your budget period starts up again in 26, 27. Okay. The reason being that right now, unless you're going to purchase something, if you're going to purchase something right now to try to avoid carryover, then you better hurry up and use it and document that people used it, students used it, and not that it was something that you were saving for next year. That's the thing. You don't want to save for next year. You want to get that up and running and going, which reminds me, I got to get some contracts out so we start meeting on stuff before the year ends. If it spills over to the next year, that's fine. But Anonymous, could you please send me an email and I will provide a listing and let everyone see the listing. But if you could, or you know what? Doesn't matter. Donna or Lee, if you could remind me to do that, I will come up with a listing of some allowable resources that you can use with grant funds. I wanted to state at this time, because of some of these things might take a time to order, that you're probably not going to be able to pay for it out of, and you'll pay for it starting next year, and maybe it'll be from approved carryover, but it's safer to wait to use it next year and to use funds for next year. Okay, but if one of y'all can remind me to do that, I will do that. Thank you. And that's someone else had posted something which I felt bad. I hadn't had a chance to respond to his post. He wanted to talk to other people that serve programs with disabilities. And I think, Donna, that could be a great poll if you get a chance to find out if anybody out there is serving students with disabilities or is a disability program. Why don't we put out, that's two things. Can you ask if anyone out there is a disability only SSS? Because this person wanted to collaborate. And we can share that and I can upload that listing of resources for disabled students also because I finally have something I can provide him with. So if you're on the if you're with us right now, I'm so sorry. I should have responded. Been thinking about it literally at least once every 2 days is what I can provide a resource and someone just gave me a great idea of what I could do. So thank you for that question. I'll get you something. But again, the timing and that goes along with everybody right now. Right now, some of y'all may be still trying to play the spending game. I've got too much carryover. I got to spend, spend, spend. At this point, it may not be realistic to implement those services and supplies that you're supposed to. If you use this year's grant funds, they're supposed to be used right now. You may, it's okay to leave money on the table, okay? If you need it, use it. But if you come to the point where I've got everything I need, I can't spend anymore, that money was probably there because positions were not filled. It wasn't because y'all weren't providing services. But again, just something that comes a point where you could say, yeah, no muss, I'm not going to spend anymore. If I don't spend it, that's fine. I'll ask to keep it. If I don't keep it, that's fine too. As long as they don't take away my next year's budget, right? For the APR Field 33, our program puts 16 until a participant graduates. Yes. So APR Field 33 is this one here. Let me switch over here. And yes, that's a good rule of thumb. So 33 is right here, listed here. And it's the field of study degree certificate earned. That's what I would recommend too. That could be our policy. Look, whenever you put somebody into the database, heck, even if they're a senior and they told me they're going to graduate at the end of the year, that's fine. I'm going to put a 16 for now. It could be one in my instructions to fill out everything on the front end and then go to the last tab or go to field 33 and just go ahead and put 16 and it stays there until they finally graduate, and then I will be forced. It will remind me to go ahead and change it. So thank you. That's a good tip. Does the amount of financial aid received in here? Thank you. If y'all could answer that poll about the disability only program, and then also if you do you serve disabled participants?
Did I get that right? I wasn't sure if I was asking the right questions.
You did. Let's see if anybody is with us, but we have a bunch of folks. Yeah, so everyone says they do. Now remember, think about your students that, oh, here's another thing, which gets well, a lot of questions about it. Documentation of a disability status. You know, you probably ask, right? Because you wanted to count toward your 2/3. And we do have somebody there. Thank you, whoever you are. If you would email me at info@nosotros.org. I can communicate and get that list to you directly and also maybe connect you to this person who wants to also connect with other disability only programs. And Donna, I really need to be better about that. That's the one thing I've not answered because I didn't know what to say, but I kept thinking I'd go back. So now this will trigger me to go back there and make sure that that gets taken care of. But thank you for doing that. And yes, everyone serves disabled students, but the question is, we ask but nowhere in the regulations does it say that we have to have verification that they are disabled. Okay. Now, when they go and claim accommodations or when they need a specific service, and that's when they have to register and show paperwork. I mean, I have a disabled son. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I can't self-report to get the services that he gets. But if I'm being asked by Trio, it could be self-reported. I mean, you could have a policy where you require verification, but are you going to force someone to bring in the paperwork, or you go to your accommodations and they can be nowadays as tight as financial aid with that information because they're really not supposed to be sharing it with y'all, not like before. So if you have an in there and they can verify it, okay, but really verification of a disability is not in the regulations, but you can make it a policy. I definitely would make it a policy if the student was requiring accommodation. If the student came to me, SSS director, and said, you know what, I need an interpreter, I need this type of equipment, I need this, then I would have to pause for the cause and say, look, I'll help you as much as I can, but I have to confirm now You have to give me permission to talk to someone that can confirm. Or if you haven't, if you don't have the credentials, I mean, if you're self-reporting, then let's get you, let's go through, let me send you over to them so that you can go through the process through them, not through me, to get that type of documentation that you need to have so that you can go ahead and get these resources that hopefully are already available to the university and doesn't come out of your budget completely. Okay. So anyway, that could be another Lisa's take. Does the amount of financial aid received strictly includes FAFSA, can include state need grants? I believe so. Let me look at the definition here. So on financial aid, field 35. Amount of financial aid received. Provide the dollar amount of the financial aid received of each participant as determined by the financial aid office. Financial aid is state, federal, scholarships, all that. The only thing they don't want you to include in that is SSS grant award that you indicated. So it should include state need grants. Okay, should include all financial aid, even including work study, minus um, SSS grant aid. Okay, so great question. Thanks for bringing that up. But yeah, you want to include, and it should be what they received. Technically, somebody could be awarded something. I could receive an award letter, but then maybe it includes also includes student loans. But I choose not to take the loan, so I decline the loan, and so I receive only part of what was awarded. You don't have to get that technical. Pick a side. Are you going to go with the award letter only or the received after the fact? It should be received, but just be consistent. It's not a game changer. It's not anything negative. That could come back and haunt you. Do the best that you can with information that you have. And if you get no information from financial aid and a pop-up window may come up asking you, but I haven't seen it yet, or someone later on says, "Hey, I've noticed you've never answered 35." I've had some people say, because financial aid won't give me the information. Oh, okay. I could try, but it's usually not. And you let me know anybody out there that's ever gotten flagged for that. I've yet to see someone get flagged with no financial aid reported in 35. Can you write a second grant aid check to get students over the 740 threshold? Now, there are regulations dealing with the amount. I don't know. Um, I want to say that I don't think it matters how many checks they get, as long as for the APR, it it doesn't go below, for example, it's probably different amount for 25, 26, but here are the instructions here that we're feeding off of for 24, 25. And I don't know if someone can do a Google search on what grant aid is now for this year, or if you already know, let me know. But I'm assuming, yes, you could, Ryan, do that. I don't think it matters how many checks they get, as long as by the end of the year, if it still say the same, that they at least received the 740 and that they didn't go over, you know, hopefully you're not giving people out $7,395 worth of financial aid. But time is a ticking, I think, running out. So I think that's got to get to them pretty quick. And again, I'm not a fan, for those of you who know me, I'm not a fan of grant aid. I was a fan when it used to be separate money that you would get in addition to your budget. But the minute they did that at first, right? They did it first to get you going. And then you said, "Yeah, I like this, even though only some of the kids get it, but I get it and it's nice to have." And they said, "Oh, you like it? Well, you can keep it, but it's got to come out of your budget." And it's getting harder and harder to support, and only a few people get it. And it becomes, honestly, to me, a headache, right? A scholarship within a scholarship. It becomes a program within a program. You get where I'm going with that. But anyway, can you provide additional information about SSS grant aid? What guidelines should we follow if we want to issue? If you haven't done it, I beg you not to do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. If you ask, you have to, um, it's an allowable cost. But once you start, it's for so many reasons, it's so hard to stop it. And although you may be able to afford it this year, you shouldn't be able to afford it, period. Okay, because your funds, 80%, if not more, of your budget is in personnel. No one should have the money to do it. And if you do, it's just a handful of students. And anytime you bring up money and issue money to participants, a headache it incurs. And people say, "Well, the students love it." And I go, "Well, how many? how many really get benefit from it? Not a lot, not a lot. So I will, go to the SSS regulations, and under allowable costs, there are two paragraph. There's a paragraph about grant aid. There's also a link to the legislation that is about grant aid. Grant aid, can only go to students during their first 2 years of college enrollment. It doesn't mean it can go to a third year freshman or third year first student. It's supposed to be the first two chronological years timing, and only issued to people past their first 2 years if you can show that you first tried to give the money that you had to true first and second year students that had need. And then if you couldn't find anybody, then only then were you allowed to issue it to students that were beyond their first 2 years of college. So look in the regulations. Also, if you want to Google, there is legislation specific to grant aid that also says that a college has to provide a matching if they're not Title III or Title Fund for Title III or Title Five, um, if they don't have a waiver. And a lot of colleges can't maintain that waiver. In fact, somebody on Facebook said I don't think the college can put up can pay for the matching. What do I do if I read it right? And I'm thinking, well, they can't do the grant aid anymore, or the college will have to come up with some sort of fund. So that's the other part of grant aid. If you're not eligible for that waiver, your college has to match it by, I think, a one-third match of everything you give out. Right. So I'll try to, again, go to the regulations if you need. Since it's written the grant, it has to stay for 5 years, correct, for the next cycle. Not sure if my institution will allow me to remove that. Oh, they will. If you, they should let you. Um, you could get out of it now if you would ask. If, some of my clients have had a big increase, which is great, right? Whenever they give an increase to everybody across the board at the college, and they say, oh, guess what? Everyone's going to get an 8% raise, a 5% raise. Everybody's happy. And I'm happy too, except I go, oh no, that comes out of my budget. Something's got to go. And I try to take from other areas, but sometimes I have to ask and say, look, this is what happened. I need the grant aid money. It's some participant support costs, so you can't make that decision on your own. You have to get prior approval from the department to take anything out of participant support costs. So if you have it currently and if you can afford it, fine, maintain it. I don't recommend it in the next funding cycle. I do think for a variety of reasons, a different focus. We're under a new mindset, under new management. And I think they're going to want you to do something different with that money. So it may not be something that is even favored. I don't think it's favored right now, actually. But your institution must have a waiver, meaning that they don't have to pay into it. But long story short, there's if tell me you could think of how many students are actually benefiting from that money on an annual basis. I can't see how the institution would be upset either way because it doesn't impact a lot of students. So it wouldn't be hurting the institution. It's very few students can get it. I doubt very many at all. Okay, so I'm thinking if I can't give it to everybody and just a few, it's not going to work for me. For Field 15, is a participant with a disability only gives us at some points as a student with a double eligibility. Do you mean when you come across someone who is low income and first generation and disabled, but there's really no category for that initially for 15? So, like 15, let me go back to 15. Sorry, I got some stuff. So, eligibility, right? So, eligibility back on that field. You have low income first generation. You've got the low income only, first generation only, disabled and low income, and no response. So this is where most of your database programs figure out your two-thirds. That two-thirds have to be low income first generation or disabled. I found that out the hard way when we had to, remember a couple of years ago when we had to do an individual, we had to do, not an individual, but we had to do an interim performance report, and they asked that question about your two-thirds. And that's when I was reminded, I guess I always heard, but I forgot that, low income, a student who's low income and first generation, and a student that's just disabled only, you put them together and they count toward your two-thirds, even though they're two different groups of students. Here's one that's both low income first generation. Here's somebody who's just disabled only. Great. Or disabled low income, great. But there's no place here to do disabled, low income, and first generation. So I see that additional 15B as a place where, and again, you want to look at the instructions under definitions that apply. Okay. And if I could find it there, look in the definitions, it'll give you more information. From what I can remember, this is so, I think I understand your question. If I do have someone who is disabled, low income and first generation, I can go ahead and take the number one here so that it counts toward my two-thirds. And then I'm still able in 15B to flag that they are disabled in 15B. But 15B is not being calculated in the math for the two-thirds. Okay. Why would I want to do that? Why wouldn't I go ahead and just claim disabled? Well, because a certain percentage of my students that are disabled must also be low income. Now, usually it works out, but sometimes it doesn't. So, strategically, if you're not a disability SSS, it's better to claim number one and then in 15A and then in 15B claim the yes. Okay. Because if you just go with the disabled only, which initially, and it's sometimes hard to get, sometimes it's always hard to get low income verification. So if you go with the disabled only and you're great, they're disabled, I can get them in. I don't have to get the low income. Well, yeah, you kind of have to because let's say you have, 10 disabled students, then a third of them have to also be low income. So you're stuck pulling the low income. But if I had them flagged as low income first generation, because I got the low income already, I can still claim that missing coding as being disabled as well. Okay. But it's no points really. It's just a way where you could flag them, but it doesn't count toward your two-thirds, not the way it's separated there. Correct me if I'm wrong when you look at the definitions that apply. Field 24, let's go to that. Field 24, academic standing. I've always used our institution's guidelines regarding academic standing. In our 2530 proposal, we used a higher GPA for the baseline. In reviewing the APR instructions, it says to select the participant's academic standing for Field 34. Which do we use? Our institution's good academic standing GPA, or the one we listed in your proposal? I'm worried if we use the GPA in our proposal that it will impact this objective. Okay, you're supposed to use the definition that's in your proposal. Okay. And anonymous, I'm whoever wrote your grant probably attended our grant writing workshop where you know why this has happened? Um, if I know that if we had used the institution's definition of good standing, the general one, the main one known, that project would not be in existence anymore because they would have lost points for not showing the need. Because when they use the 2.0, let's say 99.9% of y'all are at colleges where the general good standing is 2.0. I could be wrong, but generally it's 2.0. Heck, I talked to somebody the other day and their good standing is 1.7 officially for anybody. Okay. And what was happening is when the proposals were being written, they couldn't show a need. They couldn't show that SSS not served eligible students were struggling compared to non-eligible because of the good standing of 2.0. Everybody was doing great. There was no difference. So in that situation, they had to hunt around on campus, literally on a website to see on campus if there was any other department on campus that had a higher GPA requirement, even if it was for a specific major or one of the colleges on the campus, like the School of Nursing or the engineering program. they had to jump on that because technically it was part of the institution's good standing definition. They didn't make it up. It just wasn't part of the general overall for everybody because they couldn't show need. They wouldn't have gotten funded. So because they used that allowable yet for a very specific group like nursing students may be required to do a 2.75. Heck, at some of these more competitive colleges, they had to jump up to the honor roll of 3.0 because that was it was good standing for honor roll through the institution. So they had to latch onto that to show the need in order to even be here to do another APR. Okay. So if you used it to get funded, you're supposed to use it for your objective. And because it was a higher GPA, then the baseline was lower. So the percentage should not be extremely high. It shouldn't be in the 80s. It should be 70s or 60%. So that's why, it's not 100% of those students will have that higher GPA. That's what you're supposed to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to say that they're ever going to be able to find out which one you use, but that's technically what you're supposed to be using because of what you put in the grant to do your baseline. Okay. So I know long answer, but that's what happened. Okay. I'm having trouble writing CPPs 1 and 2. When or how do I start? You know what? Can you put, Leah or Donna, can you put the link to our webinar that is up for sale? We did a webinar on the CPPs and it also gives you resource materials. And on 2 of them, I think we actually rewrote. Bottom line, those CPPs, as long, just like everything in your proposal and your plan to deliver services, um, when it was written, they probably didn't give you enough information on what you're supposed to be doing because it's written to a particular audience of people who would read in 2 hours and basically give you the money based on what they read in the 2 hours that they read your proposal. But that plan of operation in the CPPs, they need more detail on how to implement it. So at best, the current everybody out there who has a CPP, everybody does probably. At best, it's just an outline. It doesn't give you the detail. And maybe when you look at it, it doesn't make sense anymore. Especially since something happened while we were waiting for them to get funded and, the mind shift changed. Heck, we're under different management pretty much. So you have every right to open those up again, revisit and make them better. As long as you still keep to the spirit of the intent of the overall question, you sure as heck can improve your answer. Make it better, make it more detailed, and go off of that. So you're not changing the dish. The dish still has to be delivered by the end of the year, and they want to ask how many students received the dish. But the way you cook it, the ingredients you utilize should change every year to get better and more efficient. So, you use it to get funded because it's like a business plan. But the way the CPPs were written were not very good management plans on how actually to implement them. Even though they might have a paragraph that says how the project, if you look through the CPP, there's a paragraph that says the project will do this, this, and this, and this, and this. Heck, you need to take that paragraph and blow it up. Not get rid of it, but refine it, make it better. Put in the blanks, okay? Put in the missing information and make sure your database, make sure you list the activities workshops you're going to do and the details, and then those activities and workshops, make sure your database is keeping track of that. So when it comes time to do the section of the APR that we haven't talked about yet, but we're going to talk about it now. When it comes time to do that section of the APR, which is this one here, the competitive preference priorities, which again, this is probably going to change. No, it's not going to change slightly, but this is where you answer if you did the CPPs. Well, your database should have been tracking as you did an event or an activity. In parentheses, you could have it temporarily labeled as CPP number 1 or CPP number 2. So when you provided these services and your database was set up to track them, then I can run a report that says how many. If your project earned points for this, please enter the number of students who received the intervention. Well, then I could add up and look at my report, everything that has a CPP by it and a number, I could add that number up. And then based off of my revised and updated, explanation of what we're going to do this year to do the CPP, I can take from that, and it's only 300 words or less, not a minimum of 300 words. And I work on this separate on a Word document, get it perfect, do the, you know, how many, words check. And then I plug it in here at the very last minute when I go to the website. But I have it in Word ready to go. What I don't do is start typing it directly onto the website because you'll time out every single time. So everyone out there, look at your CPPs. I hate to say this, but if you haven't looked at them all year, you may be in for a surprise to see if you could go back in time to see if these activities were implemented. And or you definitely for 26, 27 can start off on the right foot and say, look, let's revisit our CPPs because I don't think we've done a really great job on keeping track of them. So let's break down what those activities are. And if it was vague, let's make it more specific. And we're going to make sure on our calendar to put dates and workshops where when these things are supposed to happen. And let's make sure that we document when they happen and also put it in our database so that we don't have to do this guessing game ever again. Just assuming, if that's the case, but you can make it better. So this is where it comes in for that question where you want to work on it separately. And then, there's this question here, which should also be feeding off of your database. When these services occur, whether you provide them directly or they're referred, we're the only program that gets credit for referring students to services. And I think we are not doing the best job of giving ourselves credit. We don't even have to confirm that they got tutoring from the tutoring department. We just have to document that we told them to go to tutoring. Okay. So I believe these numbers usually look very, very low because we have not done a good job of giving ourselves credit, not only for the referrals, but for the things that we do. So as 26, 27 starts, if you didn't utilize this to its capacity, like on all the database programs, this should be there and you should run it as a monthly performance report. A daily, you could if you wanted to, where you could see where all your numbers were going up as you go along. And you could step in if you saw that there was an issue. But you know, these always are kind of a letdown sometimes because people realize, and I got to do a better job next year of keeping track. Okay. So thank you for your questions. We're about to run out of time. Sorry about that, but next time I can go into the Bloomin database system if y'all are interested in that. Even though you may not use Bloomin, I can show you some things that you can mimic in your own system to as we work on the APR in real time now that we've went deep into the instructions. So I hope this was helpful, y'all. We have a great week. Thank you all for joining us. This recording will be available, I believe, tomorrow around this time. And let me know if you have any questions. And I think I've got a little bit of homework. We'll follow up with some of y'all regarding the disability SSS resources. Okay. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a great rest of your